And for more insights into the judiciary in 2020, we'll now be joined by Mrs. Boma Alabi, a senior advocate of Nigeria and the former president of the Commonwealth Lawyers Association. Thank you for joining us tonight on the News at 10.
Thank you very much.
2020, of course, was not an easy year for Nigeria, including the judiciary. I've just been talking to Shola about that. How well would you say a third arm of government was able to tackle the challenges and disruption to its functions?
Well, I'd say that third arm of government is the most misunderstood and most maligned arm of government in any way you want to look at it. How on earth can we refer to the judiciary as the most corrupt institution in this country? With the police we have, the customs we have, and all of these others, it's ludicrous. And because they can't speak for themselves, people get away with these sorts of things. It's just not right. And we cannot get away from the fact that funding is a big issue. They're hugely underfunded. The pandemic happened in sort of first quarter of the year, well after budgets had been passed, which was well under the requirements in the first place. And when I say the requirements of the everyday citizens, the litigants that go to these courts for justice. And in spite of that, they were able to find ways out of those meager funds to, continue with providing service and access to justice to the Nigerian people. As Shola said earlier on, Borno State was at the forefront of this, and we all know what's going on in that state. Rivers State, I know as well, and so many of the other states began to work with technology. We know how expensive it is. I, for instance, in my little law office, had to work from home and make sure all the lawyers worked from home. That meant that they all had to have an internet device to be able to access the internet. They had to have, the access paid for those services. And it was an additional cost to our usual everyday running cost. They were able to do this, and urgent cases were heard. I was in court today. I know that social distance was certainly observed by the court and the court officials. Where that fails, it is not usually, in my experience so far, and I've been in court several times all through this pandemic period, it's not usually the fault of the judiciary or the staff, because they will come in there and remind litigants and participants in the courtroom scene of the rules. But Nigerians will not obey the rules. They behave no differently in the courts than they behave elsewhere on the roads and everywhere else. And so you then turn around and blame the judiciary for the behavior of litigants and people in the room, despite their best efforts. I think that's unfair. And we need to bear in mind that this is the one arm of government that cannot speak for itself by convention, by the nature of what they do. And therefore, we owe them a duty to be very, very careful about criticizing them and ensuring that we actually speak for both sides of the story on their behalf, bearing in mind, like I keep saying, that they cannot speak for themselves.
Yeah, and
I think they've done extremely well. They've done extremely well in the circumstances with the paucity of funds and technology. They've done extremely well, in my view and in my experience.
Well, great assessment there, but what reforms would you like to see happen in the administration of justice delivery in 2021?
What I'd like to see happen is greater funding for the judiciary. I would like to see greater independence from the executive arm of government. There's far too much interference from the executive arm in the judicial arm of government, and that needs to reduce in order for the judiciary to actually work at optimum in this jurisdiction. The judges are trying their very best, working extremely hard under punitive circumstances. I'll give you an example. Lagos Court of Appeal is highly subscribed. And as a result, there's a huge backlog of cases. The Court of Appeal literally moved all the judges from the other divisions into Lagos. They were sitting in the National Industrial Court, they were sitting in every courtroom in order to clear that backlog. That's going way beyond the call of duty. So it's not the judges that we need to be looking at. It is the funding and the independence from interference from the executive arm that we need to focus on to give them a better chance of doing an even better job than they're doing at the moment.
Indeed, and I'm really hoping, that the judiciary gets the attention it deserves. Mrs. Boma Alabi, Senior Advocate of Nigeria and former President of the Commonwealth Lawyers Association, thank you for joining us on the News at 10 tonight.